power on.
The following is a presentation of the Sovryn Tech Podcast Feed.
The Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, Dr. Brian, smarter than your ass Sovryn. Well, I gotta tell you, I might not be as smart as some of the people you are about to hear. I had the tremendous honor, not only myself, but also, as I call her, my far more rational half, Mrs. Ellen Sovryn. We were both, this would have been back in September of 2022, we were both on the Agora Podcast, where they held an entire food panel, as Sek called it. Of course, Sek Magora of the Agora Podcast. Penguin was there as well, who's, also a host on the Agora Podcast. You'll know those guys because, again, I've been putting out Into the Void episodes recently that we have done. Number 3 came out just a couple of days ago. And number 4, if you're a Sovryn Tech patron at patreon.com/SovrynTech, you've already heard that with my custom intro that has a lot of other information in it. It'll eventually come out publicly, but you got early, at least a week's early access if you're a Sovryn Tech patron to that. But anyway, they hosted this food panel with, just tremendous minds. Keith McHenry, just the stuff this guy does. Sek goes through, the show opens up with full intros of everybody, so I'm not going to retread that ground. But also Shane, of course, from the ZomiaONE podcast, which I've been on many times, always an honor. BJ Woods, DeJume. There are so many, and Ray, from so many other podcasts, like the Let's Make Some Shit podcast. Just great people, great voices. And this goes over 2 hours. Now, I don't really have much to add here in the beginning, only to say that, in my opinion, this is one of the best podcasts, not that I've been a part of, though it is that, but one of the best podcasts I've ever heard. There's such dynamite, practical, actionable information that gets laid out in this. Such important conversations coming from, and here's the real beauty of it. Okay. And one of the things that, as much as I hate the word hope, one of the things that gives me hope for the future, is a lot of the people on this, again, there's a lot of names, come from, when it comes to food and health and diet and all that, come from very different backgrounds and also practice very differently. There are radical carnivores on there. There are vegans on there. There's Ellen and I who bring, we bring our vegetarian perspective. And it's all just so damn peaceable. like everybody basically agrees in, in more ways than they disagree. And really, there's so much striking at the root that goes on here. I can't recommend this enough. I have been patiently waiting to put it out in my feed. Not that anybody was keeping me necessarily from doing it, but I wanted it to be out at the right time. And my plan was to have it out, during the holidays for when you're going to, say, visit family or whatever. And, you're having conversations around what food to eat or how to deal with the nasty economic, and supply chain issues that we're running into right now. I have been a major proponent, and certainly I will talk about, you'll hear me talk about this a bit during the food panel, but I've been a major proponent of doing everything you can to not be reliant upon the system as it is. And a big part of that includes your food choices, not just your food choices, as far as what you pick up at the grocery store, but also perhaps getting into growing your own food, even at, it doesn't have to be at grand scales. It could be small things that you can do, but essentially not being reliant upon, retail stores so much, not even being reliant upon the dollar so much, and so on. And to have so many minds, again, talking about, that's not all we talk about, but just to talk about this, have this conversation. And I mean, again, root striking stuff, just dynamite stuff that gets laid out in this. I cannot tell you the amount of pride that I feel for being able to be a part of this. And, you know, I know Ellen feels the same way. So here it is. Again, I don't really have a bunch to add here because so much gets said in this. I would dare not detract nor waste time to get to this food panel. And if you're not already listening to the Agora podcast, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens there. So definitely go check that out. But I implore you, even if you don't give a shit, you know, if you are, as I've said often, people have the right to just sit on a couch and eat Doritos all day long if they want to do that. Even if you're that kind of person, no judgment here. But I think you'll find a lot to glean, a lot to learn from this, even if you're that. Okay? Again, no judgments. And one of the best parts of this is, I mean, I know to varying degrees, pretty much all of these people. And it's just amazing to have people that have, in some ways, again, with their diet, perhaps such core differences, but to agree on so much. And to essentially work together in this podcast in bringing out so much truth against authoritarianism, you know, and all the stripes and all the effects that has upon food, the food industry, our diet, our health, and so on, is worth it on its own. But again, you're going to walk away with so much info. I love it. So I am going to let this one, I'll let the music of it ride it right out. Okay. There's no need for me to come back at the end. Again, it was just an absolute honor to be a part of this back in September of 2022. And I will see all of you, on the other side.
The Agora Podcast is covered by a BIPCOT no-gov license. Use and reuse is free and encouraged by anyone except governments or their agents. Find out more at bipcot.org.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, by all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop.
You were born free, you got fucked out of half of it, and you wave a flag celebrating.
Central authority has just embedded right in it its own problem, and that is that it means a few people make decisions for many people.
Unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Hey folks, it's Penguin and from the Agora Podcast, and I'm here with Sek and a bunch of our friends. And today we have a very large and hopefully very lively roundtable discussion for you. Sek, would you like to introduce the topic of our roundtable discussion?
Yeah, so today we're doing a panel discussion on food as a weapon. The inspiration for this idea came to me in two parts. One, reading or listening to a Derek Bros video named as such called Food as a Weapon, which goes into the history of the food industry. And then also listening to the Let's Make Some Shit podcast where they had BJ and also a friend of ours, Derica, who changed their health through diet and lifestyle choices and that sort of thing. So I was listening to that while I was working, and I came up with the idea to have a panel discussion about this. Now, the idea of this panel is to discuss it in two ways, and we can go for wherever from there. But one, how food has been used as a method of control by the state and the powers that be over populations. and then also how food could be used as a weapon to gain more independence and autonomy in your own life. That is being the general premise, but we can take the discussion wherever we want to go after that. But I think we should start with introductions, and I'm going to try to do that in an orderly fashion. And I think we'll do that alphabetically, and just giving it yourself an introduction, who you are, what do you do, and any sort of discussion will take place about the topics will take place after the introductions are done. So that would be, I know my alphabet. That would be BJ. BJ, you're up first. Tell us who you are and what do you do?
So I'm BJ. I am in St. Paul, Minnesota. I've lived and worked here for all my life. And so I'm interested in this particular discussion because I came to my path to liberty was basically through food and food choices and health consequences of certain foods and certain choices, how foods are sourced. And so I consider myself an urban sort of newbie homesteader. I make everything that I eat, basically almost everything I eat. I am a carnivore by season. So in the summer, I eat vegetables when they're in my garden. But for the most part, I eat animals, meat, eggs, fish, some dairy, mostly goat dairy or mature dairy, not I have an issue with cow dairy that's liquid sometimes. But interested in this panel because it's a very timely topic, but also because it's like my passion in life. So I appreciate having the ability to talk to you guys about this stuff.
Let me jump in because I forgot to say something. So we have a lot of different people here with a lot of different perspectives, and I would like to be able to show our audience and everyone else who may listen to this how we can disagree but still be excellent to each other. We all, I think, would have very similar conclusions but possibly different methods of how to get there. So if we can just all keep any kind of disagreements civil, that would be good. We're all friends here. So Brian, that was not directed at you, BJ, at all. So
no, this is directed at me.
Yeah, no, this is all, okay. I'm talking to you, Brian. I'm talking to you. No starting shit.
Yeah. So we're the radical vegetarians here. No,
you're not the only ones here. I mean, we have everybody from radical vegetarians to radical carnivores, and everybody's cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. Right on. So I guess I'll start off. So I am Dr. Brian Sovryn, host of the Sovryn Tech Podcast. Certainly, health is a major subject of the show. It's unavoidable. Usually, it basically started off with health and diet, and I've gone through quite a dietary journey to finally land where I'm at. But technology and how that relates to human health was certainly a major part of it, but that can't help but bleed into physical fitness, dietary choices and all that certainly became an aspect of the show as well. And I'm a major proponent of something that I say often on Sovryn Tech, which is one of the pathways to getting out from underneath authoritarianism is to simply outlive the state. So I take health pretty seriously. I'm also one of those crazy people who thinks I don't have to die. But anyway, so I can sound as nuttier than everyone else. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. But my far more rational half is also here for this, that being Ellen Sovryn. Ellen, you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. So I am the editor of the Sovryn Technica newsletter, or at least one of them. I am also a scientist. I've studied a lot of engineering, biochemical and chemical. So this is kind of something that I've been passionate about for a long time. I come to this discussion from a mostly whole foods plant-based perspective. So like most of the time our diet is vegan, though occasionally we'll indulge in, cheese or fish, but that's pretty rare. I'm with Brian in the sense that diet is a way to achieve liberty in the sense of having the optimal life experience, having energy, being vital. So I'm really glad to be here and really interested to hear what everyone else's perspective is as well.
Hey folks, this is Sick. I wanted to tell you about Appalachian Apothecary. If you care about taking responsibility for your health, natural and home-based and plant-based medicines, and homesteading and foraging, you should check out Appalachian Apothecary. Now, that's my other half. She goes by Resonance in most places. She is a big proponent of DIY medicines and plant-based medicines. Everything that she makes is either grown here on the homestead or she forages for it with the little ones, with the exception of the beeswax, which she uses for salves that we trade for from a friend of ours, and the olive oil, which she buys. We don't make the olive oil. She makes salves and tinctures and lots of other home remedies, also pickles and jellies and that kind of thing. She's a trained chemist, if that matters, and she really knows what she's doing. She's a wizard. My house constantly looks like a mad scientist laboratory. The current tinctures and salves that she has a mood enhancer. It's St. John's wort, elderflower mimosa, a woman's health, red clover tincture. It's a menstrual and menopause issue tincture, an immune booster. It's oregano, rosemary, and wild plantain. She's got a plantain salve for bug bites and scratches and cuts. I use that stuff all the time. I work outside. I'm constantly getting bit by bugs and scratched and whatever, and it really heals up quickly. She's got a de-stress. That's a 50-50 chamomile and lemon balm. It's a stress reliever, calms you down. Goldenrod tincture for allergies. I believe that also works for colds. And coming soon, what stuff she has in the works is fire cider, which is also a great immune booster. Knocks out colds like you wouldn't believe. An usnea tincture for the first signs of a cold. She's getting prepared for cold season, so that's another immune booster. A wild lettuce tincture, and that's a pain reliever. Also works pretty good, especially for like aches and pains, that kind of pain, And she has pickles for $6 a jar, or plus shipping, and also jellies, which she's out of right now, and I'm not sure the cost. The prices for the rest of this, please reach out to her on Twitter at Mother of Chaos with an X, or on Telegram, that's radical_resonance, RESONANCE. And she can set you up with a price list if you're interested in any of that. And she's also open to barters and trades and that sort of thing. So if you want to support the underground economy and homesteading and foraging and that sort of thing, please feel free to reach out to her on any kind of social media, or if you can't find her, reach out to me. Again, thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoy. Peace.
Nice. Who's next? Yes, I'm saying the alphabet in my head. Dejum, that's you.
I'd just like to start off by saying thank you for having me on here, Sec. I really do appreciate it. But a little bit about me. I am from the southwest of the U.S., specifically New Mexico. I don't have an occupation right now because I'm currently a senior, or the last year of the weird social experiment in America called high school. I'm pretty glad getting out of that. Things about me. So I'm pretty kind of the standard anarchist, just kind of want to go live in the woods, help the community out, grow some food for yourself. And I'm planning to do that pretty soon. And then also I'm an independent Satanist, and I would say that's pretty much it.
Right on. That brings us to Keith McHenry.
Okay, well, I'm Keith McHenry, and I'm a co-founder of the global movement Food Not Bombs, and I've been mostly a vegan since 1973, and I've written a bunch of books on that issue, most recently the Anarchist Cookbook, and I live in Santa Cruz, California, and where we share food every single day and outside at the town clock.
How many steady days have you guys been giving out food and where you're at?
It was 900 days exactly on August 31st.
Awesome.
Yeah, every single day.
Makes me smile every time. All right, Kay, that brings us to Penguin. You want to jump in here?
Yeah, if you're listening to this through our podcast, you know me. I'm Penguin. I co-host the Agora Podcast with Sec. Just generally a guy that kind of posts and talks about politics a bunch, makes and edits, produces the podcast. Not doing a whole lot of food production right now, though I do like to work in the dirt and in the ground, and just a guy with a bunch of different ideas about kind of the material base of liberties. So it's basically what we talk about on the podcast is not just the ideas or the idealist version of liberty or liberation, but actually the material basis of like doing production and organizing things and having like modes of exchange and actually doing them and actually so talking and having discussions, but not just about ideas, but about actually making, building, creating things and exchanging with each other, which is ultimately the basis of what we're trying to get to, at least the full half of it, if not for just the theory. So that's basically it for me.
Right on. And that brings us to Ray.
Hey guys, I'm Ray. Thanks for having me on. I am half of the Let's Make Some Shit podcast with Sex Lady. And I am an agorist and homesteader. We raise pasture-raised chicken. And I'm also a recovering addict who was extremely malnourished and very sick. And so I'm really interested in this food panel today because I can attest firsthand about the significance on your health of improving your diet and kind of coming really back from the brink of death. And I am on a forever journey to that way of life. And I just love learning new things and constantly improving my diet and my life to live a healthier and longer life. And I'm just really excited to hear what you guys all have to say and maybe implement some new changes into my life still.
Nice.
Sorry, I'm really bad at introductions.
No, that's good. That was perfect. Rayo, it's you.
All right, yeah. So my name is Shane. Kind of go by Rayo too now. People start calling me that. I do the ZomiaONE podcast, and I have a 22-acre homestead here, and what I've called the Free Republic of Pasnia. So we raise lambs and goats and chickens, ducks and turkeys. Got some gardens, and it sounds like a lot of us are doing a lot of similar things. So that's awesome. And I guess what brings me particularly to this discussion is I've been an anarchist focused on solutions for years, but in 2018, 2019. 2018, I guess I think it was 2019. I made a lifestyle, like a dietary lifestyle change, to try to, as a start to reverse my so-called type 1 diabetes. And it's been a long journey since then. And gone down a lot of different roads. And I guess now, since I guess I'm kind of switching a little bit currently, but primarily, nose-to-tail carnivore. But I've been working in more, more natural carbohydrate, natural carbs and natural amounts, and prepared correctly, like our ancestors did, like actually soaking long grain Indian rice and such. So I guess that's a little background for me.
And that brings it to me. I'm sick. I've been a lifelong homesteader. I was born and raised vegetarian on a organic homestead. And so very early on, I was very much interested in where my food comes from and having more, being concerned with what was going into my body and having more organic sources of food. I'm no longer a vegetarian, but to me, the most important things that we can do is gain control over what food we put in our body, whatever that may be. And also, I believe food production is possibly the most important tool that we have at our disposal to gain more freedom in our own lives. So that's always been something that's been very important to me. But yeah, that's me. Also, I like sticking my hands in the dirt and growing things. So I am guilty of that. I never grew up. I still like playing in the dirt. So I guess that leads us to, let's start with, in what ways, and we'll go around the group again, in what ways has food been used as a tool of control over populations by the state or other powers that be? Brian and Ellen, you guys had the hard stop, so we'll let you guys go first. What are some examples of this, or what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Do you want me to start off?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a couple of quick things. I think there's pretty good evidence historically that even if it wasn't the state, that we can also look at evidence for the state to do so. Like controlling diet to create desired outcomes in attitude and in culture is, I mean, it's not conspiracy, it's a fact. You could look at William Kellogg, who, was making, who, was part of what started the Kellogg, cereal company. This was a guy who, A, was a nut job, but B, his desire for like introducing a lot of different foods, particularly like with cereal, was, it was part and parcel of getting like desired attitudes and more, shall we say, conservative attitudes. He also had crazy ideas about like doing terrible things to women's genitalia. So diet was a part of his strategy of creating the culture that he wanted. He was also an Adventist, but we don't have to necessarily get into that. My point being is that people who started major corporations that exist today had pretty crazy ideas and goals for their dietary motives and what they were putting into the world, what they were like, what kind of foods they were creating and putting on the market. Not only that, you also have the case, there's a fantastic book. Like I know that the kind of the title of this podcast we're doing right now is Food as a Weapon. And it could be said as like food as a weapon against us. There's a fantastic book that came out a few years ago by John Potash called Drugs as a Weapon Against Us. And it talks quite a bit about how the U.S. government, and again, not conspiracy, it's fact, how the U.S. government, the FBI particularly, was using drugs injecting, shall we say, drugs into varying revolutionary movements and cultures throughout the 60s and 70s to try and quell them, like the Black Panthers and some others. So the idea that, things that we ingest, or that what we ingest is being used by authoritarians, again, not conspiracy, it's a fact. To what degree that goes and, what it means with like the modern American diet today, or what often gets called the SAD diet, right? The standard American diet. There might be some debate there, but the attitudes that food or what we ingest gets used against us is an absolute fact. There's nothing around that. I recently did a show, and I think you had heard it, Sec, as well. Where I had talked about that, so many people, like the idea that, making a lot of money, like that's so important right now. I'm not saying that making money is a bad thing, but I think that actually food, like, getting out from under the need for money is actually a far more important venture to engage in. And I know that's going to be a subject throughout this, producing your own food, like, gets you out from under the really, because like money is based around the economy. And, we only have to look at inflation today. How much money could you save? You talk about, well, could I save money by using a coupon at the store? No, how much money could you save if you actually grew your own food? These are, so I bring all this up just to say that there are very provable and easy things to show that food can be used against us, and we in turn can use food against, a lot of parts of the economy and, authoritarianism that maybe aren't so directly under our control as individuals. So, Ellen, do you want to add in anything there?
Yeah, and if you grow your own food, you don't even need money for something.
Well,
like
exactly,
that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as desired outcomes for specific foods, I think it's pretty clear, especially with the internet and the availability of certain publications, that industry is directly funding politicians and is giving money to government agencies to help them, push certain agendas. And it's pretty obvious, especially when you look at industries like corn syrup, which is in almost everything, which is super unhealthy compared to regular table sugar. It causes a much higher glycemic index. It's just crazy because these foods are being pushed so much, and that's also causing these chronic long-term illnesses, which are being treated by the pharmaceutical industry, which you could also argue the pharmaceutical industry is part of this because we ingest drugs or inject them. And there's really no incentive to cure the diseases themselves. And, it's all just part of that money and power dynamic that Brian was talking about. But if we grow our own foods and eat healthy the way that our bodies are intended to eat, then we don't need that system. We don't need that help. And then we're outside that whole power scheme. And that can be dangerous in itself. It's more like, using food as a shield
Right.
as opposed to a weapon, as a way to empower us as individuals to be outside of that system and to live longer, healthier lives, or to outlive the state, as you would say.
All right.
Very well said.
I agree 100%.
Right on. I think Keith had the next hard potential stop. So Keith, we'll let you do your bit.
Okay.
How has food been used as a weapon?
Well, I think one of the quotes that I find interesting is Kissinger's: control oil and you control nations, control food, and you control the people. And we could see that withholding food as a tactic is something that has been used for a long, long time. And the other thing is, I do agree that basically the food industry is a weapon, and that it is essentially providing toxic, it's like chemical warfare against the population. And anybody that does any traveling outside the U.S., it's always incredible to me how as soon as you enter the United States and eat even organic vegan food, it is so much that you buy in stores and so on. You just feel horrible relative to the way it is, even commercial food in other countries. And so from that point of view, it is also seems to be an aspect of dumbing down, weakening the population in the United States so that, that it's easier to control people. So that's one thing. Then there was a mention of drugs as a weapon in the 60s. My grandfather was involved in organizing the heroin trade to the U.S. during World War II for the purpose of putting down the black community so they would not rise up when they did not get to share in the GI Bill as white people were. And he talked a lot about that. But then we also see that currently where drugs are flooded intentionally into communities to put them down And that's happening in the homeless community here in Santa Cruz, where somebody is giving out free meth and so on, and putting fentanyl into little baggies of marijuana and leaving them around town, and one toke and you die. So, this is part of, I think, an overall strategy of maintaining control. And also now, what are we at the point where it's only, it's 6 multinational corporations control most of food business. Not 95% of the grains are controlled by those 6 countries. And we can see now that withholding food from, say, communities in Ethiopia intentionally as a strategy is being used. There's a lot of conversation as to around whether Russia is withholding food to starve countries, or is that the NATO that's doing that, and the U.S. So the back and forth that's really big. And we have finally, Joe Biden saying that because of sanctions against Russia, we have to expect food shortages everywhere, including here in the United States. And I know, as a person that tries to feed a lot of people every day, we are already getting to that point where a lot of foods that we traditionally could get, either recovering from Trader Joe's or from the food bank and other places, it just doesn't exist anymore. So that could easily be put in a situation in the near term where you have to comply with government regulations if you want to get your food ration. And so I think food as a weapon is definitely high on the ideology of the state in the United States, the U.S. government, and transnational corporations for social control.
Very well said. And I would just like to butt in real quick and point out some historical examples. You talk about like the Irish potato famine, or go back even further, and it was commonplace in warfare to lay siege to crops and food production. That was how warfare was done years ago. And just pointing out the fact that you don't think that strategy has been updated to the modern era. I mean, okay, maybe we're not burning fields now, but all you have to do is control it or water it down or poison it to the point where it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't nourish you any longer. So that's, it's the same, it's the same strategy, just updated for modern warfare. Let's go to somebody else. Does anybody want to jump in?
I will.
BJ, go for it.
So this is an example. I think it's not something I'm super passionate about. I don't like conspiracy theories, but I'd like to expound upon what Dr. Brian said about the fact that the Carnegie, Morgan, and Rockefeller conglomeration at the turn of the 20th century basically was, starting the impetus towards total power over food and medicine, education, finance, medical education, and not to say that, education, blah, 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 but they basically made it so that, Abraham Flexner published something in 1910, so a few years before this, that dictated basically a set of structures that wanted to sort of, I guess, unionize the standard of care. This is where the white lab coat and physiological medicine versus natural medicine and functional medicine started to take over basically and become the modern day Western medical situation that we have the last, 60, 70, 80 years. That people alive today are familiar with. Anyone who's born, from the 1920s until whenever is familiar with Western medicine. And the reason that we know about this stuff is because of this report that basically said, hey, we're going to centralize all of these things and turn them into industrial complexes. I mean, in so many words, but I'm paraphrasing, obviously, this big paper that was written. And the whole thing is just like this gigantic sort of dictionary of like how, United States general education and food education and financial information and just all of this information is just suddenly under control of these, ridiculously wealthy people. And it's like, okay, we're going to take, this is why I think it's used as a weapon, because they basically turned food and herbs, which are medicine, they turned all of that on its ear and basically, taking the natural world around us and saying that, it can't be medicine. You can't have proper nutrition to heal diseases. We're merely going to just treat symptoms of whatever you walk in here with pharmaceutical solutions. And this turns people's health into, very poor situations and just a lifetime of abuse by the medical system, basically. And so that's why I know I'm kind of with a lot of the stuff that Shane was saying, which is kind of going back to nature and, healing myself. I had a lot of health problems, and so basically being able to turn against all of this information that I was raised on, the food pyramid is a huge weapon, I think. And all the My Plate and all the myfood.gov and all this other stuff, it's like, it's a bunch of horse shit. But yet there are a lot of people in the liberty and anarchy community who still think that something is going to give you a disease. If you eat this, you're going to have, heart disease. If you eat this, you're going to get cancer. And it's like, I'm sorry, but it's brainwashing. That's what they did. They did this to us. They did this to us starting with our grandparents' generation. I don't know how old you guys are. I'm going to be 50 in less than a year. So that's just kind of my opinion. It's, it's just what it is. So.
Yeah, right on. That's just your opinion, man. Dudism. Ray, you're up. You wanted to talk?
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking along the same lines as BJ there. I was kind of thinking about the food pyramid. And I used to listen to this podcast about conspiracy theories. And there'd be 2 episodes. They'd lay out the facts. And then the next one, they'd kind of judge whether they're true or not. But there was one on big sugar, and how they used to say that, butters and fats and saturated fats, are bad, but sugar's okay, sugary cereal. And, and then it came out that, that people that were behind these studies, kind of basically falsified the information or made it appear, a certain way. But anyway, that episode basically gave a 10 out of 10, that conspiracy was true. But I think a lot of it comes down to a false belief in authority. There's so many people, especially these last few years, with this glorification of elites and science, experts in their field and everything, that so many people just have these problems and go to, their doctor and trust what they say, when I don't even know how many times you hear people that go to the doctor and they just, automatically throw pills at you instead of telling people, okay, you need to change your diet, and that's true. But at the same time, there's nobody stopping that person that realizes that, just throwing medication at me. It's like, well, you can still change your diet. You don't need to be told by a doctor to do that. I think that's all I was going to add to that.
Right on. Well said. Penguin, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, we keep talking about these conspiracy theories, and I like to be the guy that says I don't really do a lot of conspiracy theories, kind of like BJ says. But what's a conspiracy? But 2 or more people planning something or discussing and planning something in private, in secret. That's necessarily what a conspiracy theory is, and there's very fairly simplistic, material, straightforward reasons we have, the dietary recommendations, and they came out with the different versions of the food pyramid or whatever shapes they revised it to. Is that basically, like we said, we have the big sugar that played a very important strategic role as a major international industry. You've got grain, which is a strategic resource from all the countries to produce tons of grain. And it's just kind of like it's a way that countries or nations states have been structured for a long time to kind of store and accumulate a lot of grain or a lot of grains and similar stuff, rice or whatever, depending on what part of the world you're in, because they're storable or they're divisible for taxation. There's lots of different theories, and I don't want to get too much into that because every time you kind of get on one anthropological theory or the other, like someone has a counterpoint or counter examples of that. But generally, that's been the case, and we have mentioned that like grains, because of their nature, have been kind of the building blocks of states, at least to an extent. Like I said, I've heard some work we should discuss about how that's there's some people questioning that theory, but we know that's true now, that like the large scale food, but especially grain production, soybeans and stuff like that, this produced on very massive scales, are considered like strategic resources in the world, and they fuel armies and they fuel growing countries. But so they're an important base for a state to grow and have control of, and make, stabilize the prices, make there be a constant demand and constant consumption of this stuff. Maybe create alternative uses like they do with corn and the corn fuel, the corn ethanol that's not particularly great for engines, or a lot of engines that weren't kind of tuned for that. But there's always, when there is a conspiracy, it's usually a very easy conspiracy to understand. And that conspiracy can usually be whittled down to the dollars and cents that are going in and out of pockets than have been for centuries in the case of, or grains millennia, but with like sugar, centuries.
Don't be alarmed. It's only a laser sword fight. Don't be scared. It's only the Death Star destroying another world. Relax. It's only...
The best way to spend Mardi Gras! Come join C4SS and Crew Domain for a carnival celebration you'll never forget. 1 part anarchist book fair and unconference, and 1 part cultural and arts festival, Coup de Gras features guest speakers, live music, drag, stand-up comedy, parades, an agorist market, and so much more. Join us February 17th to 22nd, 2023 at Fontainebleau State Park. Visit coupdegras.wtf for more details. That's COUPDEGRAS.WTF.
Penguin with the James C. Scott reference again. I like it. Can't go wrong. Okay. Brian and Ellen, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to get something in, kind of piggybacking off of what Penguin was saying, in that, I do think we've been part of a very large experiment that is, some of which is falling apart now. For example, the low-fat diet, has been like the standard in America for decades, and for as far back as most people can remember, really. And now we're getting to the point where, yes, a lot of the, established doctors and so on are admitting, okay, yeah, no, that's not right. A big part of that, like Penguin was saying about following the dollars and cents. I'm a big believer in following the attitude as much as the money, but there's times where following the money certainly makes a lot of sense. No pun intended there. We look at something like margarine, which was like the savior of civilization when I grew up in the 80s. I'm 41 now. But anyway, like at the time, like everything was margarine. Don't touch butter. Don't touch butter. Everything's margarine. And you actually look at a lot of other staples of the low fat diet. And
it's odd that most of what became staples for the low-fat diet are things that you yourself cannot produce in your backyard. It's all food chemistry and food science that produces a lot of the low-fat diet. And a part of me can't help but wonder if there was, I mean, because we live, within the system that we have, it's the Church of Eternal Growth. Now, I don't know what's behind the Church of Eternal Growth, like why they think that the economy just has to constantly grow, and why we can't exist in some like steady state or zero state growth for a little while, because, I mean, life's pretty good at the advanced level that we're at, as far as, more material or creature comforts, say, go. But there's some desire for them to just constantly make more and more money. And food is one of those things that's just like the really, the food that you can grow in your backyard, like you can't make a ton of money off of that. You honestly, you just can't. And so it's hard for me not to think that there were groups involved that wanted a diet and a style of food, that only they could produce. And so that they could make, all the profiteering could happen off of that. Now, I mean, some of that is speculation on my part, but it's a strange thing. But also it's important to note that like science is in many ways a slow moving ship. And I'm glad that the low fat diet is, say, kind of dying off, and that some reality is being brought into this, because a lot of it came from poor science. I mean, a lot of food facts or food science that we, or diet science, dietary, facts that we accept, come from like studying rats, right? And, rats aren't humans, and again, that's another thing that I think a lot of people are kind of waking up to, which I'm glad that that's happening. But yeah, I don't think the people that were wanting to profiteer off of, say, like the low fat diet or things like margarine, which are now, again, margarine is widely accepted as a bad thing for you, like everybody's back to buying butter, it seems. I don't think they're going to let go of the reins. But anyway, I just wanted to add that in on top of the profiteering comment that Penguin was making that I thought was right on.
Yeah, and certainly all the incentives are there and all the profits were made, so whether it was it's almost irrelevant whether it was some grand pre-planned conspiracy or something that just worked out for them. It doesn't really matter, in the sense that the incentives lined up and they were able to shift the culture in such a way, and they made a lot, and it worked, and they made a lot of money, so but a lot of people got unhealthy, we'll say, because of all those, I remember those times, all those diets that were being pushed in the 80s and early 90s. And I think you're right that a lot of that is sort of falling away, mainly through a general healthy skepticism of experts. Ray, you were up first. And then, well, go ahead, Brian, you had something to respond to me, I think.
Well, actually, it's me. I was just going to say that I believe that's still continuing. I mean, and it's not the low-fat diet anymore, but like saturated fats, trans fats, sugar, especially animal fats, like all of these things are added into food now to make them extra flavorful and potent. And it completely changes our palate. So we're like addicted to this food. But it's like the majority of what is in the aisles of the grocery store. So clearly there's still a lot of money being made. It's not the low fat diet anymore, but now it's like sugar and these other like salty, high flavor foods. That's a real cash cow for these industries.
And see, yeah, that's the problem, right? Is food, we allowed food to become an industrial system, right? It's almost like a factory production system now, versus having any kind of any kind of relationship with our personal relationship with our food. It's done at a mass scale by huge industrial systems who again, it's like Brian said, it's growth overall. It doesn't matter, it's not about providing value for value or creating good relationships with your farmer down the road, or growing it yourself. It's not about gaining food to nourish yourself and having a healthy relationship with that. It's just how much product can we push and how much waste product can we stuff into this food? How much industrial lubricant can we push into this food before people will start dying, and we can get rid of this waste system from our other industrial companies. It's turned, I don't know who said it, but it's turned food on its head into this gross, like, multinational conglomerate corporate form that disgusts me. But I'm sorry, Ray, you wanted to say something? Rant over.
Yeah, I would just what you guys are talking about, the profit and everything. So one of the books that I read in the beginning of my journey to liberty was Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma. And like a large portion of that book is devoted to corn. And it talks about how, when they realized that, they can grow a lot of corn, it grows really well, that instead of growing the corn that they needed, they grew as much as they could. And they're like, oh shit, now what are we going to do with all this corn? I mean, I think we all know how many, byproducts and shit is made from corn, like corns and everything. And, we're not meant to eat that much corn. So they find all these ways, to continue making money off of this, no matter, at the expense of the people and their diets. And then as, taking that to another level, they start feeding corn to things like cows and animals that aren't meant to eat corn. So then you're making, these animals sick. So we're all eating sick meat, if you get it from the grocery store and not locally, or if you don't know where your food came from, those animals aren't meant to eat like that. And then, so we're just eating their crap.
Yummy, sick meat.
Yeah, again, and it's lobbying by these corporations, right? There's a huge corn lobby. Who hasn't yet got to speak? Rayo, you want to jump in here?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in. So, I guess I've loved everything I've heard so far. A lot of really good context. Ellen, you brought up conflicts of interest, and the first, a realization I came to over the past couple of few years is that, it's like basically the food industries now own, or I guess now the food industries and the pharmaceutical industries are basically the same. So there's literal incentive for them to, literal incentive for them to poison people. And then thinking back to earlier agriculture companies like Cyanamid, which was big into, a big early ag company. Well, they are the creators of cyanide, and I think they also made like TNT and stuff too. So like the food manufacturers, like they didn't come from like a very like nice and loving place, right? So I guess that's the first thing I would just mention kind of in terms of background. But as far as food being used as a weapon, I guess so I mentioned that, I eat a lot, like no still carnivore. So like if I eat organs, like I want to be really high quality, right? Like I don't want to eat, like we were talking about the quality of the meat at the grocery store. Yeah, don't eat that liver or anything like that. That's not wise. So I order from this guy Frankie's Free Range Meats, and he gets really, really high quality stuff that you really can't find anywhere else. Like for example, like pasture raised, Spanish pasture raised rabbit kidneys, for example, like stuff you can't find here, like milk fed veal kidney. You can't really find anywhere else. So he sells a lot of really unique stuff. Well, he recently had like a dozen SWAT people show up to his place of business, because he was selling. I guess there was some products there's some products he was selling that they didn't like. So they seized $25,000 worth of meats from him. And so I guess he was trying to do some like private membership association thing with cured sausages. And I guess they didn't like the process for it. And he feels specifically targeted because there are a handful of bigger companies out there that are doing it. So he thinks that basically the USDA is coming after him because he doesn't pay, like he's just a small business owner. He doesn't pay that much in USDA inspection fees. And then there's the fact that he has all this like super high quality stuff, like raw, like caviar eggs and like just like stuff you cannot find. A lot of really good high quality, like raw dairy and lots of things. Well, anyway, yeah. So the USDA is a literal shotgun in that, and that also goes into areas like raw milk, which is super hard to find for a lot of people nowadays. And I think that's a really, really terrible thing because I'm really big into fermented foods and drinks now, and I've been making for the past couple of years this yogurt I don't know what to call it, kefir yogurt type thing. And yeah, fermented foods are incredible. And those raw and fermented foods are really hard to find anywhere. And the stuff you find in the grocery stores, I'll bring up like kombucha as an example. A lot of kombucha has this strain in it called Bacillus coagulans, and sometimes it's the only strain in there. Well, it's like this GMO mutant strain that will like exist, like it will survive like temperatures up to like 180 degrees, like not natural at all. But that's the probiotic strain, the patented strain. That's in most kombucha. It's not a live wild culture or anything like that. So the conclusion I've come to is like you can find like similar stuff, like similar healthy stuff in grocery stores, but it's never like what you're like. It's kind of like the inversion of something really, really good. I guess is kind of the way that I've looked at it. Yeah, I guess that's the biggest thing for me is it's hard to find good, raw and fermented stuff. And I think that's problematic.
Do you have any examples you'd like to share of like how food has been used as a method of control by those who would wish to control us? Rhea?
I suppose so I get one thing I've been looking into a lot recently, and it's kind of where I started my path to so-called type 1 diabetes is kind of I guess the gut microbiome per se. And a lot of like the foods that we eat, or I guess I'm not gonna say that because a lot of us don't eat these foods, but the foods that a lot of people eat, they completely alter the natural microbiome in your gut. So instead of having like a natural balanced a colony of microorganisms, things get out of whack. And the gut is what produces things like serotonin and dopamine and other important hormones related to happiness, energy, and reproduction and things like that. So if they can alter, I mean, like pretty much everything. We were talking earlier about like these things. Like our ancestors would never think about putting these things into the drink, like into drinks or foods. They would never come to mind because they're all like the results of big industry. But all of these things have really really negative impacts on our gut, which has direct impacts on our hormones, which ties into the brain. It's really really incredible. Like you can literally like directly control the brain with the gut, in a sense. So that would be a very direct way, is hijacking people's natural like a lot of people like especially in the 90s, with everything being filled full of sugar, and maybe even before that. I don't know because I was born in the early 90s, but everything was filled full of sugar. So like for me, like I didn't have a chance. I was addicted to sugar before I even had like a conscious chance to not be. It's that pervasive where these it's just that pervasive. So.
So you mean in a very like direct chemical warfare sense, in the sense that if we're poisoning, if we're poisoning our guts and that's changing our brain, then that leads us to be more depressed, docile, have mental health issues. So the ability to resist, we'll say, is diminished. What that's the
100%. And if people are chronically poisoned and mentally sick, then like they're not going to be producing like their adrenals are going to be super stressed. They might not be producing testosterone if they're males, or progesterone if they're females. And so like lack of energy, like not motivated to do anything, like that's a pretty easy. That's pretty easy. And I mean, there's a plague of low testosterone nowadays, as far as I've been able to ascertain. So. I think it's definitely problematic and very, very direct. Yeah.
Dijum, you're up. Last but not least.
Well, I'm just going to do something a little bit short, but I was just going to add a little personal note into it, is that people have been mentioning a lot of the corporation side of it, of how it's the chemicals they inject into the food, the care of the food through transportation. And I used to work in the produce section of a supermarket for a couple months. And always in the back, we used to have just mountains of produce just rotten or just horrible. Or and a lot of times, if it was slightly rotten, we'd still set it out. And people just don't understand that's what they're eating. And a lot of times, some of the new fresh produce that's on top is just the produce under it is just purely just rotten and disgusting, and not to mention all the extra things they put into it in order to keep it ripe when they ship it in those little containers that are horribly managed, not up to temperature a lot of times, and which it just culminates into a very disgusting thing that people just don't understand that they're buying. And not to mention a lot of scandals when it comes to like the meat section of stores, where they're making the meat look redder when it's in reality just pretty much rancid meat that people are eating and buying. And then also I want to add one little more things, especially with the introduction of fast food in the last 50 years and the quality of that. That is horrible. And there's a lot of studies that have shown that increases people mentioning, mental health and decline, especially when it comes to like increase in anger and aggression, for just due to not having a proper amount of the vitamins and the things your body needs on a daily basis in order to stay in a good running order. Especially when it comes to teenagers, they don't eat well at all. It's not surprising, but especially the food the school serves them. I've had to do a couple projects on them, and I found out that a good old McDonald's hamburger is healthier than the average school hamburger, and a lot of different foods are somehow unhealthier when they're touted to be healthier. So it's creating a lot of just horrible dietary problems for a lot of kids, especially just not knowing how to properly eat and eat well.
Bang, when you're up. Well said, Jajum, by the way.
Yeah, I guess in regards to what Jajum said, just first thing is the lowest kind of food that is dispensed is prison food and school food. And so roughly, I think, they make the prison food really awful in some cases, or jails, from what I understand. But generally, when it comes to grades of meat and other products to get shipped to these places, at least that was the case that I always heard when I was growing up. I know for a fact that when I hear, I do hear stories where people are really awakened. And when I say awakened, I mean, when I say people, I guess I mean the general public. Like, it is pretty widespread that people know that we need to eat better, put better, fresher, and local ingredients into our foods. I think they have made a lot of strides since when I was growing up. I was fortunate to have access to some pretty good food growing up, fairly consistently, most of the time, even in the school setting. And I'm sure that had vastly improved even before then. But I do think that if I even hear a simple source like NPR somewhere where people are really acknowledging the importance of good food, fresh food, local supply chains from local producers and stuff, that I think that because this is a kind of a situation that only gets solved on the mass level. That we can all of us can obviously do this individually and make our own great choices individually, but the fact is that people are individually making these choices as a marketplace, and only then can you get these choices in the supply chains and the suppliers and the know-how, and maybe the change in the regulations, or getting those regulations off the background to some of these more like legally controversial items, because there are a lot of controversies with food, and there's a whole long story with that. And it's not all just necessarily malicious. What's the word? Malicious. They're trying to control food and control us by the food. When it comes to some of that stuff, there's a long story with regulation of meats and dairies and stuff that they don't even have in the mindset coming from the early 20th century about people who are going to start doing local supply chains and local productions and farmers markets and stuff. That was the 17th century for them. So, and the fact is, mechanized and industrial, and then in the future beyond that, like genetically modified organisms and stuff was going to be the future. Why would we ever kind of regress back? Well, we've obviously seen the light, and I think we're moving in the right direction for that. And I think that society, hopefully its successive generations, are going to change even more for the better.
Yeah, the great altar of progress. Yeah. either it doesn't tell me who, so either Brian or Ellen wanted to jump in.
Yeah, sure. I want to pick up off of like what Dejum was saying, and I know Ryo wrote about this in his piece a bit as well, and he mentioned in the chat here about B vitamins. I mean, it becomes a question of now, Sec, I know you like to get your hands dirty, and it sounds like most of the people here do as well. Ellen and I are people who like to too. But there's this odd issue of like, so the question becomes, okay, well, why aren't they interested in growing their own food or, picking up the organic stuff instead of the processed stuff, right? And I think we have like a genuine societal level issue of over sanitization. And this kind of speaks to the B vitamins. Like, one of the, when you decide on either a vegetarian or like vegan diet, one of the quick things that will come up is like, well, how are you going to get vitamin B12? This is essential for humanity, et cetera, et cetera. While there are foods that you can certainly get into, like nutritional yeast, Ellen, would you say that's one of them that can provide B12?
That's fortified with B12. So
right.
It's not naturally occurring.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you get B12 when it's not naturally occurring? Like in a food itself, you get it because historically, the food that we would plant, that we would farm, like we would pull it out of the ground, it'd still have all that dirt on it, right? And that's where the actual B12 comes from, right? That's where like the animals that eat that, they get the B12 from, correct?
Right, from bacteria in the dirt and in water.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I appreciate the concern of, doctors and whoever else, hey, you're not getting enough B12. The problem though, is that nobody, like even meat eaters, nobody gets enough B12 right now because we actually we over sanitize the food that we eat. And there's just there's this mentality that exists where like, oh, everything's got to be clean. Everything's got to be that. And part of that I think comes from being removed from the food production process, which is a major problem that a lot of people have been bringing up for frankly 100 years. But I think that's really key to understand that actually like getting your hands dirty, eating food that isn't like overly cleaned and all this stuff is actually a very healthy thing. But again, there's this, is it down to like marketing campaigns, advertising campaigns, where it's like, we got to make the food look appetizing. We can't have it look dirty. But the thing is, if the food's not dirty, we're not getting what we need. We're not getting that vitamin B12 that is absolutely essential. Again, not naturally occurring. You have to fortify it. Ryo said in the chat, I just want to read it. He said, come on, Brian, they just inject B vitamins into the Beyond Impossible Frankenburger. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Which doesn't help anything, it's not, striking the root as we anarchists like to say. Bingo.
I don't even think it's advertising though, Brian. Like, okay, so you don't want the horrors that come out of the factory farms to be unwashed. Do you know what I'm saying? Right. Like that's disgusting. Yes. It's not like you're just going out in your backyard and either picking veggies or slaughtering a chicken. It's not the same thing.
Well said. So yes.
They have to like power wash that stuff coming out of there because the way they produce these things, vegetables or meat, is disgusting because it comes down to volume and mass scale. We've lost touch with our relationship to food production. So, they don't really, if we're going to do it this way, which we obviously shouldn't, but if we're going to do it this way, they have to clean it because it's probably covered in, man-made horrors beyond our comprehension. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
right.
That it comes back to the problem of mass production again. Somebody else had their hand up and I forgot who. BJ, was it you?
Yes.
Yeah, you. Thank you for doing it again.
No problem. The Jitsi is a little confusing. I understand. I just wanted to hop in and just kind of 100% agree with Brian on the over sanitization, over purification. I grew up, we ate mud pies in the backyard on the sandbox, and we had scabby knees, and we would peck at them, and we picked our nose, and we wiped it on the floor. And, there's like 3 generations of people now in the Western society, I would guess, that are like born in a bubble of Purell. And I mean, we were talking, Ray and Sex Lady and I were talking about, chickens and eggs and stuff. And I was like, give me your poopy egg. No, we were just talking about the gals and I on the Let's Make Some Shit podcast. We were talking about this idea that, we do have an over sanitized, over purified society. In the last, I would guess, 3 generations or so of people in the Western, in the United States are probably born in a Purell bubble. And we were talking about how, a lot of us who are a little older grew up in this, with the idea that it's okay to get dirty. It's okay to eat, your poopy eggs from the chicken coop. And it's okay to have, a little dirt on your food and maybe you flick a bug off it or something, as opposed to this really, like Brian was saying, kind of bleached and over sanitized, consumption that we have. And not just with food, but like with everything. Everything is antibacterial. Everything is very, it's almost impossible to have a germ on some things these days, like on purpose. And look at our immunity. Our immunity is in the toilet, generally speaking, as a society. And I think something that, Shane would probably agree with is when I started looking into pathways to liberty with my food and producing things, one of the first things I did was making broth, just from straight bones and water, and it healed my gut. And the first cold that I got after doing that, it lasted me 3 days and I was fine. And usually a cold would take me out for about 5 to 6 days and I'd have no taste and runny nose and all that, sore throat. And I haven't had a cold since 2016. I haven't even had a sniffle since then. And I won't take a PCR test. So, there's a lot of stuff that all of us radical people are doing and refusing to do, depending on your stance, that are, and we're proof is in the pudding that we're healthier for it. So I'd agree with the over sanitization of America.
Penguin, you had something to add?
Yeah, I mean, you hear this so often in our circles too, but it is really kind of true, and I think it goes back to the idea of whether you're talking about politics or economics, like a planned economy, or if it's with the physical world or our health and everything. That as time progresses, people make these interventions, and I mean, you're always doing something. It's always there's some sort of intervention. Of course, if it's happening from like the top down, is something we don't like that. But all these interventions are made along the way historically without the ability to even have the kind of foresight that about what are the consequences, or not even having the ability to evenly weigh the pros and cons of certain things. So you're solving a bunch of problems along the way that seem to be the case, and now you end up with a world that's so sterile, like that BJ mentioned, that we have immune problems, kind of getting that natural immunity, which amazingly is a politically charged word now, of all things, natural immunity. But and it happens with essentially planned economies. It happens with economics. It's like, this is the reason that for better or for worse that like conservative politics exists, because I think people realize the practical reality of making like societal wide interventions is that down the road you really don't have the ability to predict, and so you end up in a situation where now you have an entire food system that just has, like, there's always pros and cons to every major change and every intervention and every kind of like central planning that you do at that scale. But you really don't have the ability to see 50, 100 years down the future where we're all trying to do local production and get our hands dirty and raise our own goats and chickens. I think the idea of that, like 100 years ago, even to somebody who's like raising chickens 100 years ago, to think that 100 years we wouldn't find a way to not have to raise chickens or to grow crops or to like have a farmer's market, even somewhere rural where they had a farmer's market. And it's like, we haven't progressed past that. No, we've long progressed past that. And we've found like advantages and pros, and people are generally, they're certainly well fed. Like they're certainly getting enough calories. People are definitely not dying of starvation, which is something that's happened and still happens, and is dying. Like the idea of starvation, people living in abject poverty as having actual starvation and malnutrition is going away in the world. But we're left on the leading edge in the United States, and like the richest or the most like resource rich country in the world. On the other end of things, we're dealing with all the negative consequences of that. I don't want to just say abundance, but like all these choices, interventions, and progress in scarecrows.
Brian and Ellen, you're next, but I know you guys got to leave soon, so I'm going to ask you this question, and this will go to everybody. But in what ways can food be used as a weapon or shield, as you guys put it, to further our own independence, personal autonomy, and self-reliance? But go ahead, and I'll let you guys answer that question.
Oh, thanks. Well, that's a great question. And I actually just wanted to pose another question to everybody in the group, but I'll save that for after responding to yours. I think food can be used as a shield, against a lot of health problems that are created by the modern, food industry. Some of the biggest killers of humans in the Western world right now are self-inflicted. Coronary heart disease, diabetes, stroke, obesity, chronic inflammation. All these things can be at least altered, if not cured, with a healthy, nutritious diet. Like Penguin was saying, people are being fed, but that doesn't mean that they're getting the nutrition that they need. We're consuming a lot of calories and toxins and additives, but not getting, vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, things that are really essential to a healthful existence. And I guess my question, which I can save for later, or I can ask it right now. What do you think, Zach?
Go ahead.
Okay. So my question is, why is it, do you think, and I'd love to hear from everybody on this, that people don't take more of an interest in nutrition when it's something that is so immediate and so important to a person's life? And is it possible that it's sort of a cycle where like people are eating unhealthy food that kind of causes them to be more, I don't know, to have less cares, to think about it less, to kind of be more focused on immediate concerns, like the aggression that Dijon mentioned? Or, is it something that people just don't want to deal with because it's dirty?
It's because it's give me convenience or give me death. So it's cheap and easy, right? To just eat fast food or whatever it is. And people are so ground down in the rat race that they're struggling to get by. They have working 2 jobs. They got kids at home. They just need to put food on the table. They don't have time to go buy locally sourced, organic, free range, whatever the thing from their local farmer, because the system has ground them into a fine mist. So it's just a matter of convenience. It's easy. It's much harder to eat healthy. And most people just don't have the time or the freaking energy after working 12 hours. So that would be my opinion on why. And that kind of goes into the other side of that, whereas is that also a tool of control to keep people's head down, to just make everybody broke and have to work at the rat race nonstop? But is anybody else want to answer Ellen's question?
Yeah, I had something that came right out the top of my head, and I also agree with what you just said, Sec. Convenience as well, but plus if you're relatively young and you have no presenting symptoms of problems, food is hard to view as medicine. And if you can get away with eating unhealthily and not even know that you're eating unhealthily because you haven't been presented with anything, you haven't had to go to the doctor and complain about something, it is very easy to ignore what you're eating. It is very easy to, because food is not something that instantaneously affects us as often as we would like to think. Food poisoning is something that you can get within 12 hours or 48 hours. Depending on what it is you're consuming, whether it's a certain reaction, but also it's something that you have to have over time, the exposure of it. And I was 34 years old until I had a lot of problems that just literally kind of hit me all at once, like in a few months. And I was sitting down to a shoebox size basket of prescription pills. And that was one of the days that I was very clear on, this is not normal for me. This is not normal for someone who's under 50 to be on this much meds. Even people who are 50 shouldn't be on this much meds. And so I think this whole idea that there's a lot of misinformation as what constitutes healthy. There's a lot of people that think they're under the apprehension that they're eating healthy when they aren't. There's a lot of marketing that feeds into that, and government and corporate control. But also, I think if you could take your local community and do things like Keith is doing, or do things like Sek and his family is doing, and just helping feed others and showing them the ways towards healthier eating. My particular, we have a local Agora here in the Twin Cities that it's a market that we hold periodically, and people just bring their own foods that they've made. And this group is very adamant about glyphosate and additional sugars and things like that. So it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Right on. Well said. Yeah, I was coming back to you guys because I know you got to go. Brian and Ellen, anything else you guys want to say in case you got to skedaddle?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it plays well with Ellen's question, which I look forward to when this goes live, to hearing everyone else, any other responses to that, but also to answer your question for myself, Sek, about, how can we use it as a shield? I mean, I think a pretty key thing there is not, like, when we talk about this, we say, well, why do we do GMOs? Because look, there are people starving. Why do we do this with food? Why do we produce this? Why do we do this so much with corn? Well, people are starving, and we need to make like cheap food for them to be able to get. They got to get their $1 hamburger, if it's still $1, I don't know, at McDonald's, whatever. But see, the problem is that that's actually not true. There is not a food shortage. There might be a healthy food shortage. I can believe that, but there's not a food shortage in general. There's a distribution problem. And that distribution problem completely comes from government regulations around the world. And so one of the, just a really important thing to do is to, get that stuff, get that deregulated, get those laws out of the way of feeding people. And then maybe when their stomach's full, they can think about what kind of food they actually want to eat. And then they can think about, like doing things like gardening, which are genuinely important, useful, and valid tools for one's own health, and for getting out from underneath authoritarianism, like I said earlier. And here's the other part too. Like, I agree, I'd rather people eat healthily, but also I know that takes time. Like I was talking about earlier with like the low-fat diet, that finally falling away. It takes time. This is a generational thing. For people to finally, like, perhaps get into gardening in their backyard, or, demanding that they're from whatever corporations, hopefully those go away too, but demanding from the food sources that the food is healthy, it's going to take time to get there. And so if we could even just start with deregulating, all of this nonsense that keeps food from continually going forward, like say hot food at a restaurant, there's no reason that shouldn't be going to, eventually to homeless shelters or whatever else. I think we'd be a lot better off there. And then people could also, just think, because again, they'd at least have a full stomach. It might not be the healthiest just yet. We'll get there. But I do think that a lot of what we're talking about is going to be a generational game. But that's the importance of doing podcasts like this, to get people at least started thinking about it.
Do you want to answer Ellen's questions as well? Or you kind of did, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. It's just people are hungry, and also, they're surrounded by, this goes well beyond food. They're surrounded by distraction. They're just constantly distracted. Like we're living in an attention wars as much as we're living in a health wars. And they really, they can't think about it. In fact, honestly, most people, and hey, look, Ellen and I do this too. We'll watch a TV show or a movie while we're, eating at times.
most people don't even they're not even paying attention to what they're putting into their mouth because they're just nonstop surrounded by screens or, whatever else that it happens to be. So to some degree, they don't care. Even if it did taste like shit, they wouldn't know because they're not paying attention to what they're even, really putting into their mouths. So I think a lot of people, they're going for that quick fix in a very attention starved or not starved, but attention deficit society that we live in. I think that's a major part of it. So this is a very holistic thing. Diet is so core, but that's the thing. It's so core. It speaks to everything. Mentality, physicality, the whole business. So yeah, bread and circuses. There you go. I saw that in the chat. So yeah, that would be my answer, is that people are they're completely distracted from this, from even caring.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. And if you guys do end up having a skedaddle, thanks for coming on. Both your input was invaluable in this conversation. So I'm glad to.
Thanks for having us.
Both. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, honored to be
here.
Honored
to stay as long as you want. I'm not kicking you out, but I'm just.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, we'll go ahead and bow out. But it was an honor to speak with so many brilliant people and be on this. We thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing the rest of it. When it goes live.
Awesome. You guys want to plug something?
Yeah, of course. Just go to sovryntech.com to hit up the podcast, and you can go to Ellen. Do you want to say sovryn.substack.com? Go ahead.
Yeah, go to sovryn.substack.com to check out the newsletter that Brian and I write every 2 weeks,
which covers diet and health a lot. So, if this is a subject you're interested in, that newsletter is going to hook you up.
Right on. Thanks, guys, for coming on. You guys have yourselves a good weekend.
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.
Okay, who was up next? Penguin, you had something to say?
Yeah, what you said earlier was really inspiring, and I think I totally agree in general for society and for myself. Totally understand that we are too busy in what you call the rat race, and yeah, it's basically our careers and our earning an income in the cash economy and just trying to pay our bills, pay our mortgage, or trying to make our way in life, or if you're doing a career or you're doing a small business. I mean, it's also basically survival in that kind of precarity mindset where we got to work a full-time job with a full-time schedule. And of course, I don't want to sound like a trad, but we're having the having both parents in a family in the workforce, or if it's a larger family unit, having multiple people in the workforce and not having anybody to kind of do those things, because it does take it's just a matter of reality that it takes labor hours to do these what I'll call broadly homestead things, which is going to be as simple as it could be raising chickens, it could be doing a garden, but it could also be like taking fresh foods and doing some canning and food preparation and food storage and stuff. But all these sorts of things, plus other things that we kind of are inclusive of, or a step beyond, household chores, but what would have been, I guess, in a previous age. But basically, over time, we're outsourcing all these things. Well, we're also outsourcing food production, food storage, and the family level food processing. But the fact is, I'm not going to make a statement about whether, what gender policy should be a workforce, or if there should be a family-oriented welfare state to have women stay at home. I don't know what the solution is. I wouldn't suggest that, but the fact is that that source of labor that's necessary for doing all these things. When you have a family unit, or like the nuclear family where two parents working in the cash economy, that labor is being sent outwards, and something critical is being lost there.
Keith, man, you've been around a long time. What do you got to say about all this?
Well, I grew food in Taos, New Mexico for 15 years, and the environment there changed so dramatically. It became really, we had a ton of food in October and November. By January, February, no matter how much we tried to preserve, you couldn't have lived on it. You definitely needed livestock, which is, even though I'm a vegan, to survive winters at 7,000 feet, that became pretty obviously important. Now, the other thing is, though, in the discussion so far, most people that I know have no place to even grow any food. In the homeless camp here in Santa Cruz, there are some organic gardens that have been put there, but they get destroyed by the city relatively quickly. And I think a ton of the people, sadly, have no idea about that there even is a concept of healthy food. That they go, their range and ability to get food is limited to 7-Elevens and local gas stations, and if they're lucky, there might be like a Safeway or some kind of thing that they can actually get to. So there's a ton of limitations, and I do get the sense from many people have no idea that there's even a concept of food being healthy or at any nature. There's just assumption because they see it on TV, they see billboards everywhere, they smell the fries from a local McDonald's, whatever it is. It's just their entire world is like that, and they have no idea how it's impacted their health or would ever impact their health. And I'm partially, I do think that is part of a strategy. Now, I spoke at the Occupy the World Food Prize event in Des Moines, Iowa, a few years back. Obama was president, and the State Department official for agriculture was the keynote speaker at that. So at the official World Food Prize event, we were the protest outside, and they had three things that they were pushing, the U.S. State Department, and one was genetically modified soy and corn particularly, and the patenting of life, because we're trying to promote the idea that was the way to feed the world. And the other is that all the feedlots, which is where that corn and soy was going, is all hooked up with a very dramatically well-organized economic system, and in which at that time they were trying to push a trade agreement with Asia, I guess, is part of what or the TTP, or I forget even which trade agreement of the WTO that they were trying to push. But what I'm basically saying is that there's an integration between banking and farming and distribution of food. And the thing that hit me the most was when I was at the University of Missouri, the head of the Sustainable Agriculture Department asked me what MU stand for, and I thought, well, Missouri University. He goes, oh no, Monsanto University. And he explained that the Farm Bureau of Missouri had voted every year against genetically modified crops, but all of them were growing them. And he explained why. So if you want to have a $2 million combine, you've got to get a mortgage for that. You have to prove that your soy is going to go to a feedlot that's already ready to buy it. And that feedlot also has to have a customer for their livestock. Then their livestock, that customer has to have a customer for the distribution of the food, whether it's a grocery or restaurant outlet. And the banks won't lend farmers money unless all that's happening. And it goes into they can't buy you can't get a loan to buy organic soy in an amount if that's what you're trying to do because you're thinking you're going to make tofu products or soy products that are organic. So there's a whole linking between global capital and food production, which I think is part of really the war on food that has to be somehow decoupled. And sadly, I think that decoupling is actually going the opposite direction in a really dramatic way, and that we're going into a future where there'll be even less and less food producers, less corporations will control it, less banks will control it, unless the society completely collapses, which is certainly a possibility. And therefore, it's going to be really crazy trying to make sure people are able to eat. I think also the world I think that the studies show that a majority of the food, even so, is actually grown by women on sustainable farms. So most people in the world are surviving basically by small farms that are essentially run by women in sustainable, in the third world, particularly like in Philippines and Asia and Africa and so on. So actually these mega food corporations are not responsible for a bulk of the world's food. And then finally, I would say that, when I wrote the book, The Anarchist Cookbook, one of the aspects I wanted to show was that most commonly people, particularly when I started Food Not Bombs 42 years ago, and I was influenced by by Francis Moore Lappé and Diet for a Small Planet, there's that only droughts and things like that were locusts, infestations, and so on were responsible for hunger. But we can see all the way back to the fall of Rome that it was actually economic policies that caused hunger in Rome and helped influence the collapse of that society. And it wasn't inability to grow food; it was the economic and political system that made it impossible. And the most famous one, of course, is the so-called potato famine in Ireland, where huge amounts of the food was being exported to England while people were starving, and there was like a whole Protestant Catholic manipulation of food where Protestant churches would only feed you if you converted to them, and this kind of political manipulation there. And there was the potato blight only affected mostly the lumper and not other parts of agriculture. It was, so that famine, and then I think we moved to more recent famines. The one where the movie Black Hawk Down in Somalia, in that event, it was 3 tons of fresh food was exported from Somalia for every ton of food aid imported to handle that famine. And I think that's generally throughout history, and my research for that book has been the case, that the real issue, for example, and then one last thing I'll say is in Ethiopia, when I spent some time there, there's these mega farms in Ethiopia with state-of-the-art greenhouses growing amazing amounts of food. But that food was actually controlled, and a lot of it was flowers actually, tulips, was controlled by the Netherlands. And it was exported mostly to Europe, and the other food that was being grown in Ethiopia was being grown by the Chinese, and that food was being exported to China, but also to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. So there are 25 million people facing hunger in Ethiopia while there's tons of food, and it was largely being exported out of the country. And so I think this manipulation that occurs could be really stark here in the United States if there is rather intense social unrest occurring with the collapsing economy. And I would like to note that there's 3.8 million households in the United States that have told the U.S. Census Bureau, or this is extrapolated from their study, that they will be evicted in October. And so those people moving to the streets have no way to store food. They have no way to refrigerate food. They are dependent on soup kitchens or shoplifting, things like that. And there's an ever larger number of Americans who are basically in food deserts, and they could maybe get tons and tons of calories, but virtually no nutrition. And they're essentially, just like Patel said in his book, Much Starved and Stuffed, I think that might be his name of his book. He wrote some nice blurb for my second book, get the name of his title. But that we are starving. Many poor people are basically starving, although they're overweight and have access to lots of calories, but very little access to actual nutrients. So anyway, that would be what I got to say there, so I don't take.
Well, Keith, let me ask you. No, while I got you, what solutions do you think we have available to either combat this or better ourselves, or change the material conditions for people on the ground?
Wow. Well, my strategy so far, and I think a lot of people in Food Not Bombs in general, strategy has been to just create an autonomous community outside the system that exists as much as possible. But and hooking up with people that grow food to get food distributed. But it is huge problem. I mean, I had only an acre of land in Taos, and we, the season's very short there. That's a lot of the problem. And even with a giant greenhouse, it was still pretty slow work. And I have we have a garden in the back of the place I'm staying right now, but it's definitely not enough. So to feed people, growing food is hard, and growing it successfully is enough to have surplus is really hard. So I have not much of a creating our own autonomous communities is going to be important. And I do think of the food shortage, it's a possibility of feeding everyone, but the political and economic system has to be so radically changed to make that the priority, as opposed to hoarding food and all that. So, it's hardcore. So changing the entire political system is going to be very difficult. But that definitely seems that political and economic system does need to be dramatically changed. And I think it needs to me, I would want it needs to happen really, really quickly, but I don't think people are educated or ready or have the responsibility necessary to certainly do that society-wide at this point. So maybe just small numbers of us in setting up our own networks with, neighbors who do grow food and people that do have access to land and all that, it's going to be the short-term solution for small numbers of us. But in the industrial world, I don't know. Right now in Europe, of course, they have a major policy to turn farmland over to large transnational corporations, or to basically, I know, for instance, in the Netherlands, they're trying to reduce the amount of total farms by something in the area of 30%, and yet that's the second largest exporter of food in the world. And you see this across Canada, even as discussing reducing farming dramatically. And it's not clear why governments and why this has become a global issue, that producing less food seems to be something really important to transnational corporate power. But there definitely are policies like that happening across the world. And it's, you could see huge farmer uprisings around the world. The most famous, of course, recently was the Indian farmers uprising in New Delhi. But you have like a total revolt now in the Netherlands. You've had similar things that are starting up in Italy and Germany. And so farmers are starting to try to create a global network to fight back against this new agenda to reduce agriculture.
Keith, do you have to run, or are you sticking around for a bit?
I'm going to have to leave here shortly because I'm almost out of electricity at this point.
Okay. Before you go, do you want to plug anything that you have?
Yeah. So, my latest book is The Anarchist Cookbook, and then it does talk about that. That's not so. And I am about to finish another book, which doesn't really have a name, although the working title right now is called Soup Street. And Food Not Bombs itself is got a global Zoom meeting tomorrow at 9 Pacific Standard Time. And you could email me, keith@foodnotbombs.net. And the level of hunger and desperation on the streets of the world, let alone in the United States, is growing rapidly. And so we can use as much support if you can connect and divert food to local Food Not Bombs chapters in your neighborhood. Or to volunteer with Food Not Bombs would be super helpful. And I think that's one of the entryways to maintaining at least some ability to have some people eating in communities, is to gather together in groups like Food Not Bombs Homes not, food not lawns, things like that, and try to work and network together. I think the survivalist idea of storing thousands of cans of food in your basement and buying the AR-15s is really a very short-term solution to surviving the rocky future that we're likely to have at this point. So that would be my main points of foodnotbombs.net. And thanks so much for having me, and such a great topic. And it's so interesting, the diversity of speakers and their backgrounds and their influences. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate your input here, and it's always a pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate all you do. So take care, man.
Thanks. Yeah, we're going to go back out on the street and fight. Bye-bye.
See you, brother. Peace.
Bye-bye.
All right, who's up next? How can we... Did anybody not answer Ellen's question that would like to? Ray, go for it. Also to June. Go for it.
Okay.
Ray first.
So I think her question was, it's been a while since she asked it. Why people aren't taking this initiative to improve their health and their food security. Mm-hmm. And I think it comes, and I totally agree with what everybody else has said so far, and their insight has been really great. I think it comes down to a level of ignorance, addiction, and arrogance, maybe like an ignorance and unwillingness to take that step and that personal responsibility. And I think, the internet really overcomplicates skills these days. And I know that's something that Resonance and I have been trying to do with our podcast. It's just kind of break things down, and so people don't get hung up on details. I know I do, and I imagine there's probably a lot of other people out there. And because there has been such an uptick in people, wanting to take their health into their own hands. And I would say, as an addict, I kind of recognize it, and I feel like there's a lot more food addiction than maybe people realize. I've seen firsthand people with like actual food addiction, and it was pretty eye-opening to me. But even on an everyday level, the everyday person, I feel like maybe it's even just the habit, the addiction to the habit. But habits are so hard for people to break, especially if they have been broken down by society or the rat race or their jobs. It's like people don't want to put that extra effort into learning that new skill. And a lot of people growing up were very pampered, and didn't go without, and maybe lack the basic skills of cooking, And I think also to make those changes, people have to admit that they eat like shit or, live a very unhealthy lifestyle. And I know it was hard for me to admit it, back in the day, but just to kind of be like, okay, this is a problem. I think so many people are kind of blind and just think that, or take their health for granted, and don't have any desire to make those changes.
Dejum, you're up next, and then BJ.
Okay, so I'm just gonna speak on a couple different things that people have said in the past on this topic, especially what Ellen brought up earlier. If I remember her name correctly, I'm horrible with names. Is mostly not being able to, that also Rayo put into the text chat, is the ability to use your property or to have any property at all, or the expense of being able to start producing your own food for either sustainably for your family, yourself, or even to help out your community. It's really just hard for a lot of people in the rat race of kind of the middle class and the kind of lower poor class, you could say, especially they're not being able to fund themselves, not being able to even buy their proper food, as they a lot of times have to spend more money on being able to keep their house afloat and their bills, and as people have mentioned before. And they'll just choose the cheapest chip bag, the cheapest amount of meat, cheapest fruits, or even part of that is people not caring about their food is they're seeing kind of the obsession with material social status, of can I get this new car, this new clothes, the new TV, this new streamable thing, so on and so forth. Kind of the obsession of the consumer of getting that new thing, the new fad, the new technology, and just not focusing on our health ultimately. And then especially of people have mentioned the rat race, and I could say from a little bit kind of where I am from, we're a very oil dominated town, so a very large wealth gap here, not too much of a middle class, as it's just rich, or it's just you're in a trailer and you're pretty much poor. And these guys work, people employed in the oil field are working 6 days a week, working almost 10-hour shifts, or sometimes even working 2 weeks straight, 24 hours straight. It's insane, and it's really just hurting them ultimately because they have no attention to put to their health and what they're putting in their body.
Yeah, all good points. BJ, right? BJ.
Yeah, I was just going to expound a little bit on what Ray said and Dejum. I agree that there's a lot of misinformation. I think Ray was talking about how people really just don't know how to source food, or like even what they're eating. And then Dejum talking about, people prioritizing different things in their lives. It becomes a problem because I, as a personal case, I mean, I am a struggling food addict and former addict. But I think people, by and large, like just the average person, if you ask them what they think is healthy, they don't know, or they think they know based on information that they're getting from horrible sources. The internet is pervasive with misinformation. There's, eggs are bad for you, and then the next day eggs are good for you. So who can rely on this information? Nobody. There's also a lot of the thing that I was trying to bring up as a personal story was I didn't know that I was unhealthy until I had some medical problems. So until people actually, like, people do take their health for granted, like Dejum was saying. And if you don't have a problem and you're just like, you're living your life and you're doing your thing, then why would it be a problem? If it doesn't present a problem, then you have no way of knowing that it's a problem. And so it's not just ignorance, but just this is what the rest of the world is doing, so.
Dejum just put in the chat, forgot to mention that a lot of times food addiction can exist because the individual is using it as a coping mechanism for mental and emotional problems.
100%. And as a former emotional eater, it's a circle. So if you're using food as a way to comfort yourself, or you had a bad day, or you're having a great day, which is what I did, that's how you can abuse yourself and make yourself worse. I was following nutritional guidelines for the most part. I mean, on the weekends, you have beer and pizza with your friends, whatever, right? But for the most part, I was following what mainstream information was telling us was quote unquote healthy. And yet my peers were eating the same things as me, and I was the one that was fat and sick. So,
Penguin, you had something?
Yeah, I think that goes back to what I was saying. It's been mentioned several times about the link. Jim keeps mentioning it a bunch, and we have discovered for it's probably been a couple of decades, but it's probably been longer than that, but very slowly discovering the effects of like diet and the gut and gut composition. Basically, it's like gut bacteria, and I guess the resulting chemical composition of the stomach and intestines and everything, and its effect on everything else. So mental states, mental health, emotions. I mean, and then I guess all the interconnectivity of all the organs and all the organ systems in the body that we just didn't know. So again, it's something that we did not even understand to be able to even use as information inputs when we made decisions in the past, and how that is affecting us now. So in the past, we did face problems. It was not overlooked. There was malnutrition, starvation, lack of food or lack of ability to distribute the food properly. Also, a lot of food is perishable, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's major basic issues, and then how that's solved. And we have solved that effectively again and again and again. It's been certainly a learning process and a process, a process that has like generated a lot of information along the way. So hopefully we can do it faster and faster as time goes on. But over time, because there's always like entrenched power and in concentrated interest and involving government and state and everything, is that we make these interventions that down the road have negative consequences that are often so far beyond the ability to understand what those would be, because we didn't even have the knowledge about the interplay with all these organ systems. I mean, there was obviously just more direct material concerns involved as far as emphasizing grains or emphasizing sugar and de-emphasizing fats and so on. So again, we have to be very careful, and it's one of those places where I certainly do think you should do your own research, because the information is actually out there in a way where I don't think there's a lot of harm or a lot of competing information or anything. I mean, people have really kind of figured it out. I mean, there's been enough fad diets and enough, this food is good for you, this food is bad for you, and so on, that people have really given up and whittled down to basically the correct information. So yeah, eat your fats, eat your proteins, get your macros, and obviously you want to eat clean and organic. And we've kind of, at the very least, if you're aware of these things and you have the time just to even in the mental energy just to think about these things, and you can emotionally get yourself in a state to do this, make these changes, and think about these things. The information is pretty clear, unless you want to go into real specifics or a deeper level of detail. We know what to do. We're all basically on the same page here. Obviously, there's meat and vegan and vegetarian diets and stuff like that. But when it comes to what the bad trends have been and what they probably ought to be rectified, in what direction they should often be rectified, we pretty much have a pretty good idea. Like a lot of people emphasizing fats, like I said, de-emphasizing sugars and complex carbs and stuff.
Rael, you got something to add here?
Yeah, sure. So I think Keith mentioned he was talking about I guess the farmland being reduced, and I'll just add an anecdotal example from I've noticed in this kind of general area. But yeah, many farms around here are actually being converted to massive solar panel fields, which I guess that's better it's better than corn for fuel in terms of the environment, because I don't think they're going to spray the solar panels with antifungals from a plane. So I think that's probably a benefit, even though it's still scammy. Definitely still scammy. But I guess I could reply to the couple of questions that were posited. And I don't really have anything additional to why don't people take more of an interest in nutrition. It's just, it's largely time. Taking the time to actually learn what's healthy, and then once you learn what's healthy and you go to the grocery store and you realize none of that's really healthy, it's kind of overwhelming. So it's a lot easier just to forget about it and not worry about it. And I guess it's been, I've cooked 99% of my own meals at home for the past 3 years. And I usually end up spending an hour or two in the kitchen. So yeah, Sek was talking about, people just, people don't have time with their lifestyles. And yeah, it takes time, but it definitely takes time to, but I think it's definitely worth it. Because, harkening back to that first question, in what ways, has food been used as a way to shield, as a shield to further our own independence? Well, putting that investment in time and, effort into, the highest quality food that we can produce for ourselves. We can drastically improve our health and well-being. And I know when I started eating clean, I got a lot of mental clarity, a lot of a lot of physical well-being. I was definitely, I didn't realize it because you kind of get caught in this baseline, and you don't realize that you don't feel as good as you should. And once you start to make some changes, or even just a minor kind of diet change, or I guess not really minor, because it's not easy to do. Once you make a lifestyle change and realize, oh wow, I've actually felt like crap for 15, 20 years, and I just didn't really realize it. So I guess there's I was definitely impeded for years without really knowing. So that's the biggest thing, is we can use food to drastically improve our health and well-being. Obviously, as we've talked about throughout this discussion. We can use it to reduce our dependence upon the servile society. Something I see as, on the homestead is, there's lots of lots of potential paths towards, side income and financial independence. So that's a really, really, really great angle too. I guess that's what I'd have to add.
Let me just jump in here and add one thing from a slightly different angle. And I haven't heard this particular perspective, although I've made this point before, but we'll never be free if we allow, speaking from a strategic standpoint, we'll never be free if we allow our enemies to produce our basic necessities for us, right? So you have to almost think of this in terms of long-term strategic warfare. So if the enemy you're fighting, in this case it would be the state, is producing your food, your water, your electricity, your medicine, the things that you need to basic survival, if those things are being controlled by those who would wish to control you or do you harm, then you're never going to. I don't care how many weapons we have. I don't care how much Bitcoin you mine. I don't care how much silver you stack. If they control our food, none of that matters. If they can starve you and your family, you will do whatever you're told. And I'm absolutely the same. I would do anything to protect my kids. If it came down to feeding my kids or not, I mean, any parent is going to do what they have to for the survival of their children. So the answer for that is to not allow those people to be the sole controller of food production. If you can gain whatever control over food production you possibly can, we are much better off. Then once that's taken care of, then we can start worrying about, printing weapons and Bitcoin and whatever else. But speaking from the angle of strategic warfare, these are things that we have to control if we ever wish to be free. So who hasn't answered? I'm losing track and I'm getting tired and I'm old. So who has not answered how do we use food as a weapon for independence? Someone. Penguin, go for it.
Yeah, I guess in regards, that's a basic fundamental question for this thing. And best thing I can think of is if you think of a pyramid, like a pyramid of hierarchies I said hierarchies, but in the sense of the hierarchies of needs, or in this case, the hierarchy of, importance of different things that we need to focus on materially. As far as, I don't want to say our praxis, but in the sense of liberation, the ultimate liberation, you'll have to be, it's basically the actual Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is food and basic sustenance are at the bottom. Well, it's also at the bottom for liberation or for community, or however you want to look at that. So, it's the first step I think we need to talk to. So it's not just out of personal preference that we talk about this on the pod, and a lot of our friends want to talk about that. It's the basic, it's the unspoken kind of rule that it's the first thing we take into our own hands. As individuals, obviously, we're talking about that in the form of a diet, but as communities, producing the food, distributing the food, and so on is crucial. And it's something that, how do I say this? It's something that there is a strong basis for already in our society. So this is kind of like the idea where an anarchist friend of ours has really made the whole kind of direction our podcast originally went in to make sense. So she called Carl has his ideas, essentially framed them as white market agorism. And I was like, wow, because I was always wondering, how does did a whole podcast on this. How does Cass's ideas kind of interface with agorism and Konkin's ideas? Anyway, I personally said not do very well, but it's basically just white market agorism. But anyways, without going on that tangent, it's just something that people do. It's an everyday activity. It's gardening. I mean, it's eating, obviously, is an everyday activity, but also gardening and planting and harvesting your own food. That's something that's becoming ever more and more popular, but it's never really gone away. And it's maybe it just changes in the scale and the popularity and the significance. And I think it's waxed and waned in its significance in society as far as actually producing food to eat in, a meaningful amount versus as a hobby or to grow, flowers for more aesthetic purposes or for pollinators or whatnot. But I think we're at a point where, people are definitely into planting it, gardens, it being crucial and important skill to cultivate and understand and to pass down from generation to generation. And there's garden centers everywhere, and there's just the materials and the know-how are readily available for that reason. So I think that it's always going to be our step one, because we're saying if you have as much as just some like planters or a room for a couple of raised beds, you have the space to do some gardening, and you have access to gardening materials and a garden center and seeds. So I think that it's step one, and the mindset and the skills that you cultivate by taking that first basic step can then it's a good baby step, if you're not doing it, to apply towards other, material aspects of liberation.
Yeah, very well said, man. Does anybody else want to answer that question? I'm losing track of who has not answered it. Ray, did you answer?
No, I don't think so. But I guess I'll just say simply that every dollar that you can not put into the corporate system by growing your own food, raising your own meat, making your own medicine, is a win for your personal liberty. And, learning a skill at a time is invaluable, because you're definitely not going to have that time if shit ever does hit the fan or you're in a situation, it's just going to be impossible to learn what you need to know in that moment. So anything that you can do to prepare, and not even just to prepare for that moment, but to live a freer life out of the system, is worth it. And I would say that that's a shield.
Yeah, for sure. Did you answer that question? I can't remember.
I do not think so, but I don't have too much to add, because a lot of what other people have said is pretty much what I would say and agree with. But I think also a lot of people haven't really started to kind of start being connected with their community, or starting to help their community, almost just because of kind of, especially in the West, of just this mindset of the obsession of the individual and being able to satisfy your own needs without anybody's help. If I don't need the community, and blah blah blah. And it's perfectly fine for you to be in your own to be your own individual and be able to satisfy your needs and wants. But at the same time, you do need community in order to, as Ray was just saying, if you go and get in a bad spot and you're not able to provide for yourself anymore, you need to have those people around you to help you keep afloat. And that's kind of pretty much my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that community outreach and food distribution are very crucial to set up now. Even things like what Keith McHenry is doing with Food Not Bombs, and I've got some stuff for some hungry outreach to hungry people going on as well. But the more we can set those systems up now, and sort of strong community bonds, and just help out those in need near us, the more this is going to be helpful to have strong communities to rely on in the event that there is some sort of economic collapse, or I don't know, supply chains or food crises throughout the world. If we have a sort of mutual aid system set up now, that will be less harsh on all of us in the event that one of these things comes in the future. So I agree with the community bonds as being the very crucial aspect of this. BJ, you had something?
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that a lot of people have answered the question by saying that there's a lot of information on the internet. There's a lot of people in IRL sections of your life that are probably helpful. But I wanted to point out that this is something that Sec brings up sometimes in past episodes, that every time you use food or get food or grow food or cook food, you're making a political decision, whether you're political or not. And so this idea that you're not political, but you're still eating what we've been told to eat for years, you're basically, it's counterintuitive, it's counterproductive to your whole identity. And it sounds like an insult. I'm not making an insult. This is for people that, like me, who've only just come to liberty in the last few years. So I just wanted to add a resource that I personally use, and it is made by anarchists. Farmmatch.com. If people aren't using it, it is a growing website. It's sort of like a Craigslist for finding your own farmer that's within a certain distance to you. And most of these farmers that at least in my area, all the farmers that I have access to have pledged to be basically anti-mainstream food, and that you have to sign a membership agreement. And most of the membership agreement verbiage is, I demand healthy, nutritious food that is not controlled by the state, that is not contaminated, and that is grown by people who basically don't like the state and will ignore it. And we grow food and we don't care what the state says. And then you buy this from them, and they have drop sites or they have some sort of shipping method. And it's relatively affordable. I'm getting grass-fed beef between $5.50 and $7 a pound, depending on the week. I'm getting raw milk if I want it. I'm getting all kinds of stuff that I would not be able to get at a grocery store. And I live in a city, even though it's pretty quiet where I live. I live in a city and I don't drive, so because I'm super urban and just never got around to driving. So I'm stunted that way. But anyway, it's something to look into. If you haven't already, Max Kane and Joseph Ackland are the people that I found it through. So, and my local freedom cell.
Nice. Rayo, you had something to say?
Yep, just real quickly, just a couple more resources like that. Realmilk.com, they've got a directory for raw milk if you want to find a raw milk provider in your area for raw milk or for fermentations. And then also just if you ever need it, findaspring.com. If you're trying to get, if all you've got access to is tap water and distilled water, something you want some really, really high quality spring water, you can find something there. So I'll just toss those out there.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, we have 3 springs like within 5 miles of us. It's fucking awesome.
Nice, dude.
Yeah, no, we go there all the time. Not that we drink tap water either way, but just if we're going that way, we're filling up jugs of spring water. So, does anyone else have anything to add? The open floor. Anybody can say whatever. We do have to wrap this up before too long, but nothing?
Be excellent to each other.
No, there is that. I was going to say that anyway, but all right. Well, let's wrap it up. It's been a pleasure. You guys have had just amazing insights, and I appreciate you all coming on. I do have to go put the baby to bed, but if you guys want to do a round of plugs, this would be the time to do it. Rayo, why don't you plug Rayo? Why don't you plug what you're working on?
Sure. So, ZomiaPodcast.com for podcasts on Vonu, self-liberation, topics like that. Paznia.com, PAZNIA.com to learn about the Free Republic of Paznia and the Second Realm Network that we're building. Because, community is obviously super important, and, local communities. We're trying to build a more kind of worldwide thing, too. I guess a network of second realms, per se, or network of self-sufficient homesteads and safe places for self-liberators. So that's Paznia, PAZNIA.com. And then finally, Libertarian Type Publications, if you're looking for any, books or strategy guides, anarchist Agora's fiction. Well, I guess we have ghost phones and ghost pads too. So privacy tools, actually, ways to enhance your digital privacy in the digital second realm. So I guess that's it. And Sec, thanks so much for the invitation, man. It's been an honor. Lots of again, like you said, there's lots of incredible insights, lots of great people. It's been a pleasure. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. Well, let's go with Ray. Ray, you want to plug some stuff?
Yeah. So you can check out our podcast, mine and Sex Lady Resonance, the Let's Make Some Shit podcast, to maybe learn and try out some new skills with us. I have an Etsy shop called The Willow's Gift, where you can find my art and herbal medicine that I make. My husband has Agorist Acres. If you need any seeds, if we don't have what you're looking for, we will get it for you. We actually are on Farm Match for our chickens. So if you are local, you can find us at Radiant Farms. And if you guys want to listen to me stumble through names I can't understand, you can listen to me narrate audiobooks for Agora the Podcast.
Well, that you're working on an easy one now, so that's good.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying this
anybody
next
doesn't
one.
know what she's talking about, she did the reading for Homebrew Industrial Revolution by Carson, and it is definitely a mouthful to read that book. There's a lot of, it's very wordy, a lot of it packed.
Yeah. Really props to you that, because I've been editing it, so I've been having to listen to you. And sometimes I'm actually paying attention, and sometimes I'm kind of just making sure that everything goes relatively smoothly. But you did a really good job. I'm pretty impressed considering all
It's
the.
not an easy book. Yeah, it's not an easy book.
Yeah, I've been listening to a couple of those while I'm doing chores and stuff, so those are great.
Well, thank you. This next one I think will be much smoother. It has definitely been a much easier read, and I've just been enjoying reading them anyway. So I don't care what you guys think about the way I read it.
You're having fun either way. That's
right.
That's what counts.
That's a good attitude to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to imagine Sisyphus happy. If anybody gets the reference, you get a cookie.
I don't eat cookies anyway.
I also don't eat cookies.
I didn't
BJ,
get the
plug.
reference. I was being smart ass because I didn't get the reference. But okay,
did?
so no, I didn't.
Wait, no. What's the reference? Oh, you didn't. Okay,
I don't. That's why I said I don't eat
it's
cookies
Albert-
anyway. Screw your prize. I don't
It's
care.
Albert
if I
Camus. It's a myth.
Oh, I'm not
Okay,
a scholar. I'm not a scholar, so I don't read all the.
But it's Camus. He's
And?
Anyway, so
You forget that I was statist
he's
until like 2013. I don't know who that is.
he's based as fuck. I don't know. He wrote the myth of Sisyphus. It's a whole book.
I guess I read the Greek stuff, not necessarily everybody else's stuff. But anyway, I'm just talking out of my ass. If anybody is interested in radically reclaiming your health with real food, nice alliteration, you can follow me at Ketolicious. It's KETOLISH.US. It's a shitty name, but I'm working on something else anyway.
Wait, don't you do something else? You wrote a book?
Yeah, I am an author. I wrote 150 plus recipes, and it's called Diabetic to Ketogenic and Reclaiming Your Health with Real Food.
Sweet. June, you got something to plug?
Nothing really.
Anything to say?
Yeah, I don't really create anything, but I would just like to say thank you for having me on again. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. It's been a blast. All right, well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. My eyes are actually getting heavy. The baby's gonna outlast me tonight, I think. But thanks for coming on, you guys. I know it was a long one, so I appreciate you guys sticking around. And this has been a blast. And if anybody wants an MP3 of this to put on whatever your stuff, we can do that too. Yours should have come by now. Oh, I didn't get jerky yet. I don't think.
Said it was delivered at 5:24.
Shit, I should go check the mail. It's been raining. We didn't check the mail.
That's fine.
It'll be all right. But yeah, thanks everyone. Penguin, do you have anything to add before we go?
No. No, I said no.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
It's been a very long podcast, but we had a lot of interesting stuff. Some real bangers in there that I'm wondering if we can want to clip out and just kind of either quote on the Twitter or quote or just have like clips, because there's some really cool stuff that you said in particular. And well,
we have an Odyssey channel for that. Go check out our Odyssey channel. Our Agora Podcast on Odyssey has all the clips with all our zingers and bangers, and I got a guy for that. So.
Oh, we do that. Okay, great, good to know.
Yeah, we do that. You knew that.
Yeah. Not okay. Great.
Yeah, we can do that.
Cool. Well, he's going to have to listen to the whole 3-hour episode of this one. But no, it's been great. And I've come up with some new ideas on the fly. And I've really, before doing that, rethought a lot of things based on what you guys have said and people that are here. And it's been really awesome just from that aspect of it. So, just kind of everything that I said today is not necessarily some kind of thing that I've been working on other than kind of basic stuff that goes with the theme of the podcast. But a lot of it was just in response to some of the stuff that you guys said. So you really made me think about things a little bit differently, or just kind of inspired me to think in a certain direction. So yeah, I think it's been a productive conversation.
Yeah, definitely. For real. All right. Well, you guys have yourselves a good weekend, and everybody be excellent to each other, and peace.